At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. After all, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it that way. I'm Larissa. Let's begin. The bottle tumbled through the cantina's hazy atmosphere, a green missile on a slow arc trailing a plume of spilled synthale. Randall stood his ground. With a slight turn of his head, he let it whistle past his ear and explode against the bulkhead. The establishment's roar swallowed the sound of shattering glass, a cacophony of hissing mechanics and sizzling fryers. The chaos was familiar, almost comfortable. He slid into the booth opposite the hulking, four-armed dendron and the twitchy, feathered chur. At the table's head sat their captain, a being of a species new to him, who possessed a stillness that made the cantina's chaos feel distant. Captain Valeric.
"You're late,"
the dendron rumbled, his heavy jaw shifting, the thick wooden ridges within grinding. He was Boar, and his blocky form like bundled petrified wood filled the booth.
"Fashionably so,"
Randall said, offering a disarming smile.
"Traffic was a nightmare. A whole convoy of ore haulers tried to cut their transit time through a stellar nursery. You know how it is."
"No," Boar said. He clenched his four hands into knots of dense knuckles.
"I don't."
Randall's smile persisted. He turned to the captain.
"Valeric, I hear you're in the market for a job that pays enough to retire on, and I happen to have one."
Valeric fixed his gaze on him, his eyes deep in shadow. He gestured with a three-fingered hand.
"Talk." "Hellion Corporation,"
Randall said, leaning forward and lowering his voice.
"The Bastion."
The name landed on the table, heavy and inert. The chur pilot, Pella, let out a squawk and ruffled her rust-colored feathers. Boar laughed a low, grating sound like rockfall.
"The Bastion, the most secure corporate fortress in the Outer Rim. You want us to raid the vault carved into a tidally locked asteroid, a vault they call unbreachable. That's a funeral invitation, human. A tastefully engraved one."
"Every wall has a door," Randall countered.
"Every door has a key, or a lockpick, or, in this case, a specific application of kinetic force."
He slid a data chip onto the table.
"Their stronghold has a security flaw, a loophole in the cycling protocols of its plasma conduits. With the right timing, you can force a system reboot, a 30-second window of vulnerability, enough to get in, grab the bearer bonds, and get out."
Pella tilted her head and blinked.
30 seconds? That's a razor-thin margin. We'd be flying into the station's exhaust plume.
"But possible?"
Randall pressed.
"Possible,"
she chirped, her voice a tumble of high-pitched syllables.
"Ill-advised."
Boar slammed one of his lower fists on the table, making the glasses jump.
"It's suicide. The Bastion has automated turrets that can peel the hull from a frigate at 10,000 clicks. And then there are their patrol drones. Which is why you need a gunner who can keep their heads down,"
Randall said, gesturing to himself.
"I'm the best there is."
The dendron stared at him, then at Valeric.
"Captain, this is a farce. He's a grifter. Look at him. He has the build of a starved reed."
Valeric remained silent. He looked from the chip to Randall, weighing his crew's desperation against the proposal's audacity. The gambit was operating on credit and hope.
"What's your cut?"
Valeric asked, his voice a low, even baritone.
10% of the credits,"
Randall said.
"And a personal item from the vault, a data core. That's it. The rest is yours."
Boar's jaw went still. He stared at Randall, suspicion and greed flickering across his woody features. Such a low price broke every rule of piratical economics. Valeric slid the chip into a port on his wrist link. His gaze drew distant for a moment as he scanned the data. Randall had designed the data to be beautifully plausible, a lie wrapped in a layer of convincing technical jargon.
"A trial,"
Valeric said, his gaze locking back onto Randall.
"You'll run gunnery drills with Boar. If you're half as skilled as you claim, we'll consider it. If you fail..."
Randall's smile broadened. Fair enough. When do I start? Boar shoved himself from the booth, his bulk scraping against the cheap synth leather.
Now.
Randall stood, dusting off his jacket. He gave a little bow to the captain. Pleasure doing business with you. As he followed Boar's broad, tough back toward the cantina exit, he met Pella's gaze. Her eyes, wide and anxious, followed him. In their eyes, he was a con man, a fool, or both. That was useful. The lower their expectations, the better. The gunnery range aboard the Gambit was a cramped utilitarian space that smelled of charred capacitors and hydraulic fluid. Holographic targeting drones zipped through the air, the ship's tactical computer randomizing their paths. Along the back wall, mounted chunks of actual asteroid debris served as hard targets. Boar picked up a plasma rifle with his upper left hand, the weapon looking like a child's toy in his massive grip. He braced it against his shoulder, a lower arm steadying his side, the other resting on the console in a posture of stability.
Standard kinetic targets first, then we'll see about the moving ones.
He fired. A bolt of plasma seared across the range and vaporized the first asteroid chunk's dead center. He fired again, another perfect hit on the second target, a third, a fourth. He set the rifle down on the console, the barrel glowing faintly.
Your turn.
He grunted, gesturing to an identical rifle. Randall picked it up. It felt solid, well-maintained. He hefted it, took a casual stance, and sighted down the barrel. A holographic drone zipped into view. He squeezed the trigger. The plasma bolt went absurdly wide, searing a black scorch mark on the back wall's upper left quadrant, a full 2 meters from the drone. Boar's jaw began its telltale grinding.
Did you just miss?
Calibration's a bit off, Randall said, squinting at the rifle. It feels like it pulls high and to the left.
The rifle's calibration is perfect,
Boar growled.
I supervise all weapon maintenance myself.
Another target appeared. Randall fired again. The bolt flew even wider this time, hitting the wall in almost the exact same spot as the first. A third shot followed, then a fourth. Each missed the holographic targets by an absurd margin, striking the back wall's upper left corner and peppering a small area with scorch marks. He switched to the hard targets. He aimed for the largest asteroid chunk's center, the one Boar had hit so effortlessly. His shot blasted a piece of metal off a conduit running along the ceiling again, high and to the left. Boar snatched the rifle from his hands.
Enough! You're a liability. Your aim is a menace to the bulkhead.
His forearms flailed, punctuating his disbelief.
What is this? Some kind of joke?
An off day, Randall said with a shrug, though his mind was racing. The grouping was consistent. That was the important part. Every miss was a data point.
An off day?
Boar roared.
You are the most incompetent marksman I have ever seen. You are a danger to this crew and this ship.
From the corridor, Randall saw Pella peeking around the doorframe. She looked from the scorched wall to him, her feathers puffed out in alarm. She had probably hoped he was their salvation. Now she was looking at him like he was a walking airlock malfunction. Valeric stood behind her, his expression impassive. He had observed the entire time. For a second, he met the captain's gaze. The captain's look was quiet, unnerving, and deeply analytical.
I told you, Captain,
Boar said, turning to Valeric.
He's a charlatan.
Valeric remained silent. He turned and walked away, leaving Randall to face the Dendron alone. Randall knew what this looked like. His demonstration of almost artistic incompetence was part of his plan. And in the world of pirates and mercenaries, incompetence was a death sentence. Perfect. Randall sat in his small, borrowed cabin aboard the Gambit, a flex screen propped on his knee. He was a structural engineer. To him, a security network was a structure. He approached it like any structure, find the single load-bearing point that, when compromised, would bring the whole thing down. He needed the Bastion schematics. He needed the deep-level structural and engineering blueprints, the raw data behind the sanitized security layouts he had provided Valeric. A corporation keeps such blueprints under the deepest encryption, so he had to maneuver them into giving him the schematics willingly. Using a heavily encrypted public terminal from his last stop, he had created a false identity, Julian Croft, a cocky, high-end risk consultant with a string of impressive and entirely fabricated corporate clients. Now, as Julian, he sent a formal request to the Hellion Corporation's Public Relations Department. He proposed a pro bono penetration test of the Bastion's network infrastructure. The proposal was an audacious, almost arrogant move, the corporate equivalent of walking up to a fortress and pointing out the cracks in its walls. A low-level administrator would flag such a bold request. It would climb the chain of command until it landed on the desk of someone with the authority to feel both annoyance and intrigue. It took less than an hour. A notification pinged on his flex screen. His request was forwarded. It bypassed subcommittees and regional managers, landing straight at the top. Tasman Moray, head of security, the Bastion. She requested a meeting. Remote holographic conference tomorrow 0900 ship time. Randall smiled. She had taken the bait. The next morning, he sat before the holo emitter in his cabin. The air shimmered, and a figure resolved itself in the space before him. Tasman Moray was a Cillian. She stood tall, clad in tailored corporate uniform that fit her athletic frame. Her skin was a mosaic of tiny, interlocking matte black scales that reflected almost no light, making her appear a silhouette carved from the void. She had large dark eyes with no visible sclera. She regarded him with a polite professional stillness, a hint of boredom in her posture. "Mr. Croft," she said, her voice calm and measured. "You have my attention. You have 5 minutes of it." "Miss Moray?" Randall replied, leaning back in his chair with a feigned ease. "A pleasure. I'll only need 3. He gestured with a casual confidence. "I was reviewing your public network's handshake protocols. Robust and standard. You're using a modified Kellerman encryption suite, which is solid, but it has a minor vulnerability when daisy-chained with older relay systems. A clever code slinger could exploit it to create a ghost signal, spoofing a friendly IFF tag. It would be a messy way in, but plausible." He was feeding her deliberately obvious observations, things any competent security chief would already know. He was testing her, seeing how she'd react to a peacock strutting in her yard. A flicker of something, amusement, perhaps, crossed her features before she suppressed it. "We are aware of the Kellerman suite's theoretical limitations, Mr. Croft. We have compensated for them." "I'm sure you have," Randall said with a grin. "But it's always good to have a fresh pair of eyes, isn't it? Sometimes the people closest to the problem lose perspective." Her expression stayed neutral, but he could almost feel the intensity of her focus across the link. She gave clipped, direct responses. "We have noted your unsolicited offer," she said, her tone indicating the conversation was over. "Should we require the services of an outside consultant, we have a list of approved vendors. That list is exclusive. Good day, Mr. Croft." Her image vanished. Randall chuckled to himself. She was sharp, her demeanor dismissive. Perfect. His goal was to confirm her identity and open a direct channel. He had extended the invitation. Now, he waited for a response. Tasman Moray sat in her pristine minimalist office deep within the Bastion's heart. The view from her reinforced window showed a panorama of stars, occasionally occluded by a passing defense drone. The holographic meeting with Julian Croft was a mild diversion in a day of predictable routines. The man was arrogant, but a current of artifice ran beneath his confidence. His points were textbook, but he delivered them with an air of someone who knew much more than he was letting on. She had dismissed him, but she had also flagged his credentials for a background check. An hour later, an alert chimed on her console, a low-level intrusion attempt on one of their public data servers. Her system automatically quarantined the malicious code and presented it for her analysis. The code was clumsy, amateurish. It looked like the work of a script kiddie trying to make a name for himself. But as she peeled back the code's layers, her interest sharpened. The outer shell was crude, but the program's core was lean and purposeful. The program was a sophisticated network mapping tool, a scalpel, rather than a bludgeon design to smash through their firewall. The clumsy exterior was a disguise. Croft. This was his real test. He was showing her what he could do. A slow smile touched Tasman's lips. He wanted to play. Fine. She would play. She initiated a high-level aggressive trace. This was her personal toolkit, the digital equivalent of releasing a predator into the network. She moved beyond blocking to hunting him. She would follow his signal back to its origin, identify his hardware, and burn his system to a crisp from half a sector away. Her security systems, the most powerful in the corporate world, surged into action, sending out probing signals, demanding a digital handshake from the intrusion's source. Aboard the Gambit, Randall watched the data streams pour into his console. Tasman's response went beyond a simple block. She was counterattacking with overwhelming force, just as he had predicted. Her powerful trace protocols were slamming against his makeshift firewalls, interrogating his routing points, and, in doing so, they were giving him everything he wanted. As her systems mapped his location, he was mapping hers. The handshake signals, the routing paths, the latency between nodes, they formed a map. He cared little for her software. He was interested in the hardware it ran on. The trace revealed the Bastion's main server hub locations, the primary network conduits, the power relays. Then it appeared, the station's digital nervous system schematic. Then Hellion, in its infinite pursuit of cost-saving efficiency, had run the main data and power conduits right alongside the station's primary structural supports. To save on shielding and construction costs, they had bolted their most critical infrastructure directly to the station's load-bearing frame. He had it, the path from the network to the structure, the key. He severed the connection, wiping his digital trail. He left a single data packet behind that would appear on her console after the trace failed. The packet contained a single word: impressive. In her office, Tasman watched the trace signal vanish into the digital ether. The attacker vanished, leaving no trace, and then the message appeared on her screen. Impressive. She stared at it, her jaw tightened, but a flicker of grudging respect softened the line of her mouth. His goal was something else. He had provoked her, using her own strength against her. He had wanted the counterattack, but why? What could he possibly have gained from a failed counterattack? She leaned back in her chair, her stillness absolute as she considered the puzzle. This was more than a mild diversion. This was a challenge. Randall stared at the 3D model shimmering above his console, a latticework of light, a composite image he had built from the data he siphoned during Tasman's counterattack. The glowing green lines were the network conduits he had traced. The fainter ghost-like gray lines were the structural supports he could now extrapolate, their paths mirroring the infrastructure bolted to them. He zoomed in on the asteroid's core, where a single massive column of gray ran through the center. The primary support beam, a spine of ridiculously over-engineered metal and composite materials holding the entire rock together. And running right alongside it, almost touching it, was a thick green line, primary thermal conduit 12, a superheated channel designed to vent excess energy from the station's core reactor directly into space. A colossal design flaw, a catastrophic failure waiting to happen. A proper engineer would isolate a superheated pipe from the most vital structural element of a station, but a corporate accountant, looking to cut costs on shielding and routing? Absolutely.
What is that?
Randall spun around. Bohr stood in the doorway, his massive frame filling it completely. He narrowed his eyes, fixed on the holographic display. Randall keyed the console, minimizing the structural data, leaving only the network schematic. "Shield frequencies," he said. "Modeling the propagation of kinetic energy through the Bastion's asteroid. I'm looking for a physical weak point, a fracture line we can exploit. Bohr stepped into the room, his heavy footfalls thudding on the deck plating. He stared at the display, then back at Randall. He understood firepower. This was physics, and he could see the difference between the security layout and whatever this was. These were wave propagation models, a far cry from turret placements.
You're running a different agenda,
Bohr stated.
This is about more than a vault. You're after something else.
I'm after our payment and keeping us alive, Randall countered. This is how we do it. The plan is the plan. The Dendron's jaw plates clicked with a slow, deliberate rhythm.
I don't trust you, human. Your aim is a joke. Your plan's convoluted. I'll be watching you. The moment you put this crew at risk for whatever real game you're playing, I will personally space you.
He turned and left. His threat filled the silence he left behind. Randall let out a slow breath. Bohr's suspicion was a problem, but a manageable one. He just had to keep the deception going for a little longer. The final pieces were falling into place. He had the target. Now all he needed was for the crew to hold together long enough for him to take the shot. The briefing took place around the holotable in the Gambit's small common area. Valeric stood at one end, observing. Pella perched on a stool, her feathers fluffed. Boris stood with his upper arms resting on the pistol's holster at his hips, his lower pair crossed over his chest. Randall took center stage, activating the holotable. The Bastion schematic appeared, the one he had shown them before, highlighting the vault and the supposed security flaw. All right, here's the dance, he began, his tone confident. The attack begins at 0400 during the sector-wide shift change. The Bastion will be at minimal staff. Pella, you're the main event. He pointed to a flight path that looked like a frantic scrawl. You'll make a loud, aggressive approach, draw their fire, pull the automated turrets and any patrol drones into this debris field here. He indicated a dense cluster of asteroids nearby. Your job is to be the most annoying target they've ever seen. Keep them busy.
Pella nodded, her beak clicking. Be annoying. I can do that, I think.
While she's putting on a show, Randall continued, a two-man team will use the distraction to breach the hole near the vault. Bohr, you and Valeric. Once you're in, you'll plant the charges to trigger a core breach alert. Hellions emergency protocols will automatically jettison the vault module to preserve the station. We're tricking the system into throwing it at us. Then we use the ship's tractor beam to snag it on our way out. Clean, simple, and highly profitable.
And what is your role in all this?
Bohr growled.
Moral support?
Covering fire, Randall said with a grin, looking directly at the Dendron. I'll be on the main cannon. The reaction was immediate.
Absolutely not!
Bohr exploded.
Captain, this is madness! He'll be shooting at Pella! Put me on the gun, I can suppress their turrets and give her an opportunity to survive!
All of them turned to Valeric. Silence stretched as they waited for the captain's response. He fixed his gaze on the holographic plan, but Randall saw him looking past the glowing lines, as if seeing the holes, the gaps in the logic. Bohr, Valeric said, his voice silencing the room. Your plan is to go head-to-head with the fortress. That guarantees our failure. I'm betting on the unknown variable. He looked at Randall. The human takes the gun. Bohr's jaw plates ground together with enough force to create sparks. He held his tongue. An order was an order. The air crackled with his unspoken defiance. With the strategy set, the crew dispersed to make their preparations. Randall was about to go to the gunnery pod when a small, feathered form blocked his path.
Hey,
Pella said, wringing her slender three-taloned hands.
Look, I am a good pilot, best in the sector maybe, but I can only dodge for so long, especially if my gunner is hitting everything but the enemy.
Randall's usual witty demeanor softened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, antiquated object, a liquid-filled sphere with a needle floating inside. an old magnetic compass from Earth. He pressed it into her hand. "When the lights go out and the nav computer glitches from all the plasma fire, this will still point true. Just like you." He gave her a genuine smile. "Trust me, fly like you're trying to shake your own shadow." She stared at the compass, then at him. The fear in her eyes remained, but now it mingled with a fragile trust. She clutched the device and nodded, then scurried off toward the cockpit. She felt played. The attempted hack by Julian Croft was days ago, but it still bothered Tasman Moray. The attempt was too elegant for a simple probe and too theatrical for a serious attack, a performance. So an audience existed and a purpose she had yet to see. Driven by a professional obsession, she had bypassed the standard corporate protocols and run a deep background check on the identity, using her own private resources. The Julian Croft persona was a ghost, fabricated less than a month ago, but the biometric data faintly embedded in the holographic signal, that led her somewhere. It led her to a name Hellion had tried to erase. Randall, a brilliant structural engineer from a rival company on Tellus. His career had imploded 5 years ago after a catastrophic accident at a mining installation, the Valiant Spark disaster. The official report blamed him, citing gross negligence and faulty designs. Disgraced, his credentials revoked, and with a warrant for his arrest, he had vanished. As she dug deeper, Tasman's unease curdled into something colder. Following the trail of Randall's life led her to the Valiant Spark incident. The official report was too neat, the evidence too perfectly aligned against him. Using her clearance, she accessed Hellion's sealed internal archives on the mining technology's acquisition at that site. The dates were damning. Hellion had stolen Randall's revolutionary designs for acoustic fracturing, then framed him for the disaster from their improper implementation. They had ruined him to cover their own theft and incompetence. She had built her entire professional life on a foundation of order, competence, and integrity. She served the corporation because she believed in its mission of progress, and she took pride in protecting its assets. But this was corruption, a betrayal of that mission. This corruption ran deep within the institution she had dedicated her life to. She opened a private encrypted holochannel, a risk, but one she had to take. Randall was in his cabin, reviewing his calculations one last time when the comm pinged. He accepted the call. Tasman's holographic form appeared, her expression grave. The playful glint in her eyes had vanished.
"We need to talk,"
she said, her voice lacking its usual professional reserve.
"I ran a background check. I found your real identity, the engineer from Tellus."
Randall's body went tense, but he kept his face neutral. "Your words are meaningless to me."
"Don't,"
she cut him off.
"In trying to find you, I found records Hellion meant to bury about the Valiant Spark disaster. I've been reviewing the internal reports. The data tells a different story."
Silence stretched over the connection. She had crossed the line from adversary to witness. "What do you want, Tasman?" he asked.
"I want to know what you're planning,"
she said.
"This is about more than money. The vault is a decoy."
Her gaze was intense, searching. She was sizing up his intentions, weighing them against the truth she was uncovering. He answered indirectly. "They built this place, you know, the Bastion. They used a bastardized version of my own structural principles to do it. The irony is poetic." Understanding settled on her face. He was attacking more than a symbol. He was attacking their flawed, stolen creation, a creator aiming to unmake.
"The Bastion has a new defense protocol,"
she said, dropping her voice to a near whisper.
"Unlisted in any public specs, a close-range, wide-angle energy pulse. It can disable the systems of any ship that gets too close. It takes 30 seconds to charge. Be aware of it."
"Thank you, Tasman," he said. She held his gaze for a second longer, a flicker of conflict crossing her features. Then she ended the call. Randall sat in the silence, her warning echoing in his thoughts. The plan now had a new, dangerous variable. He found himself respecting the woman who had just provided it. Pella ran through pre-flight diagnostics for the 10th time, her compass swinging from a hook on the console. Randall was in the gunnery pod, calibrating the targeting computer to his own unique parameters, ignoring the ship's standard combat solutions. Bohr found Valeric on the small observation deck, staring out at the starfield that held their target.
"Captain,"
Bohr said, his voice a low rumble of insubordination.
"This is the last time I will ask. Remove the human from the gunnery chair. Let me do it. I can protect Pella. He will be the death of her."
Valeric turned. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard.
"And what is your plan, Bohr? To punch through a wall of plasma fire? To outshoot your fortress? Your way is direct, honorable, and it will be the death of us all. The human's way is different. Its logic is opaque, but I recognize it is our only chance." "He is a charlatan,"
Bohr insisted.
"He is using us for his own ends." "We are all using each other for our own ends," Valeric replied calmly. "That is the nature of this business. His goals happen to align with ours, breaking the bastion. Now you will follow the plan, or you can take a shuttle and leave now. Those are your only choices."
The Dendron's powerful frame sagged. He gave a sharp, jerky nod.
"As you command, Captain,"
he growled, before turning and stomping off toward the boarding craft bay. Randall overheard the exchange on the internal comms. His deception was corroding the crew's trust just when he needed it most. He had Pella's tentative trust. Valeric remained an enigma. Bohr was a wall of opposition. He finished his work, locking in the final firing solution. Its targeting sequence was unorthodox, aiming at seemingly random points on the asteroid's surface. He was planning a controlled demolition. He designed each impact to create and propagate a fissure, like scoring a sheet of glass before the final tap. Only this glass was a mountain of iron and stone, and his scoring tool was a plasma cannon. He took a deep breath. Time to make some noise. The Gambit bucked and shuddered as it burst from the cover of a large asteroid, accelerating on a wild, aggressive vector toward the bastion. Alarms blared across the fortress, their klaxons echoing faintly even through the vacuum of space on the ship's audio pickups. "Going loud!" she yelled into the comm, her voice tight with adrenaline. "They see us!" In the Bastion Command Center, Tasman Moray watched the approaching ship on the main view screen. A small freighter, heavily modified, moved with suicidal aggression. "Launch patrol drones," she ordered, her voice calm amid the rising sea of alerts. "Target its engines. Disable it. Leave the hull intact." Pella saw the drone bay door slide open on the station's surface. A swarm of small, agile fighters detached and screamed toward her. "Drones away!" she shrieked, banking the Gambit hard to starboard. "I'm taking us into the field." She threw the ship into a roll, threading it between looming shapes of dead asteroids that flashed past the cockpit viewport. Plasma fire from the Bastion's automated turrets stitched the space around her, bolts of incandescent energy incinerating smaller rocks into glowing dust. "Gunnery support!" she yelled, her knuckles white on the controls as she dodged another volley. "Any time now, Randall!" He spoke over the comms, unnervingly calm. "Firing." The ship's main cannon, a heavy plasma accelerator, bolted to its dorsal spine, discharged with a heavy thrum that vibrated through the entire vessel. Pella watched the energy bolt on her forward screen. It flew far from the turret that had just fired on them. It sailed absurdly wide, missing the entire fortress by what looked like a kilometer, and impacted harmlessly against the asteroid's southern face, kicking up a silent plume of rock dust. The comm channel fell silent. Then Bohr's voice, already in the boarding craft, crackled with fury.
"Did you see that? What was that? Captain, he missed!"
Pella swerved to avoid a drone's attack run. "Randall, what was that?" Another thrum from the main cannon, another bolt of plasma streaking into the void, another impact on a seemingly random patch of rock, far from any strategic target. Bohr's jaw plates clicked over the comms, a frantic, furious rhythm.
"He'll be the death of her!" Valeric, give me the order. I will take the gun.
Valeric's voice held a new tension but was firm.
Stick to the plan, Boar. Randall, report.
Just acquiring the target, Randall said, his voice still placid. He sounded like a man lining up a casual shot at a shooting gallery, completely at odds with the battle raging around him. The lie was a stone in his throat, but he had to maintain the deception. Inside the gunnery pod, Randall maintained a perfect calm amid the chaos. The ship groaned and shuddered around him as Pella pushed it to its limits. The angry, panicked voices of his crewmates were a distant buzz. He focused solely on the targeting display. The display showed him the Bastion's custom schematic, with a series of pre-calculated impact points highlighted in red. He was beyond aiming. He was conducting. Firing Solution 3, locked. He murmured to himself. He squeezed the trigger. The cannon fired. On the bridge view screen, the shot sailed harmlessly over the fortress's top, disappearing into the blackness of space.
He's hitting everything but the station.
Boar roared over the comms, his voice a distortion of rage.
What is he doing?
Randall, talk to me! Pella pleaded, her voice strained as she threw the ship into a gut-wrenching spin to dodge a missile. I can't keep this up! In her command center, Tasman watched the bizarre display with mounting confusion. The attacker's gunnery was pathetic. It went beyond incompetence into the nonsensical. The shots scattered too widely to be accidental. It felt less like an attack and more like an insult. What was the purpose of this?
Sir,
a tactical officer reported.
The freighter's shots are ineffective against our defense capabilities.
I can see that, officer, Tasman said, narrowing her eyes. This felt wrong. Randall was too brilliant for such a clumsy, pointless assault. A method lay hidden in the madness, a logic she had yet to grasp. Valeric's voice cut through the comms, sharp and commanding.
Randall, stand down from the gun. Let Boar take over. That's an order.
Randall held his course. His targeting computer chimed, indicating the next point in the sequence was in range. He had his custom schematics overlaid on the live feed. He aimed at specific geological strata on the asteroid's surface. Each plasma bolt was a measured kinetic impact that exploited existing fault lines and stress points in the rock. He was applying pressure, preparing the structure for the final break.
Almost there,
he said, his voice low and steady, a whisper meant only for himself, but broadcast to the entire frantic crew.
Just a few more.
He lined up the final shot. It aimed at a seemingly random, unremarkable spot on the asteroid's southern pole, hundreds of meters from any structure. He fired. The plasma bolt crossed the void. Boar had enough. He was on his way from the boarding bay, intent on storming the gunnery pod himself. Valeric was about to sever Randall's control of the weapon systems. Pella was seconds away from breaking off the attack run. And then, the final shot hit. For a moment, silence. The last plasma bolt struck the asteroid's southern pole, kicking up another silent puff of dust. The Gambit's crew held its collective breath, waiting for the ridicule, the recriminations, the inevitable failure. On Tasman's primary monitor, the Bastion Command Center, a single critical alert flashed red. It bypassed notifications for weapons and shields, presenting a deep system engineering warning of a classification new to her. Structural integrity warning. Catastrophic failure imminent. Thermal conduit 12 ruptured. A groan, low and deep, echoed through the asteroid structure itself, a vibration that resonated in their bones, the sound of a mountain screaming. Randall had targeted his impacts to exploit and amplify structural weaknesses within the asteroid. They were small, individually insignificant, but together they had created a network of microfractures directing the station's internal stresses toward a single point. His true target was always the superheated thermal conduit he'd discovered on the schematics. The accumulated stress, focused and amplified by the asteroid's own geology, converged on the conduit at its most vulnerable point. The pipe, already under thermal stress, cracked. Superheated plasma, thousands of degrees hot, vented directly onto the freezing cold metal of the primary support beam bolted to it. The shock was instantaneous and catastrophic. A massive fissure, glowing with internal heat, cracked across the bastion's surface. It raced from the southern pole, splitting the fortress in two. Lights flickered and died across entire sections. On the Gambit's bridge, the crew stared in silence as their supposedly impenetrable target broke apart before their eyes. Entire fortress sections, office blocks and docking bays and defensive platforms sheared off into space, tumbling in the void. The unbreachable bastion, the Hellion Corporation's pride, was crumbling from the inside out. Bohr, who was halfway to the gunnery, froze mid-stride, his forearms hanging limp at his sides. Pella, in the cockpit, let the ship drift, her hands hovering over the controls, her beak hanging open. The fortress was coming down. Randall walked onto the bridge. The sharp scent of discharged weaponry hung in the air, thick with a shocked silence. Bohr stood frozen. Valeric's usual calm had broken into open astonishment, and Pella just stared. Their gazes flicked from him to the main view screen, which showed the slow, silent destruction of their target. Randall walked to the main holotable and brought up his custom schematics. The complex web of wave propagation models and structural weaknesses filled the air. He pointed to the single massive support beam at the asteroid's core and the thermal conduit running alongside it. "Punching a steel door only breaks your knuckles," he said, his voice calm in the aftermath. "But if you score it along the hinges just right, a single tap will make the whole thing fall off its frame." The bastion was an imbalanced structure built on unstable rock. I targeted my shots to create and connect fault lines. They channeled the asteroid's own internal stress right to this point. The final shot was the trigger, not the weapon. The final tap. It ruptured the thermal line they stupidly bolted to their main support beam. Thermal shock did the rest. He explained the controlled demolition, the stress propagation, the catastrophic failure caused by a single point of engineering arrogance and corporate cost-cutting. He had hit his targets all along. They were targets only he could perceive. The turrets and drones were mere distractions. Bohr looked from the complex schematic to Randall, then back to the disintegrating fortress on the view screen. The Dendron, a being of direct action and overwhelming force, processed a strategy so indirect, so alien to his way of thinking, that it took a long moment for it to compute. His jaw plates clicked once, twice. Then he made a low, rumbling sound, a deep vibration that started in his chest, a laugh of profound, upended certainty. He looked at Valeric. His expression transformed. Respect had replaced suspicion in his eyes.
"The human was on target,"
he said, his voice a low rumble of wonder. Then he looked at Randall. Pella just shook her head, a disbelieving grin spreading across her face. You magnificent crazy bastard," she whispered. Chaos reigned in the Bastion Command Center. Consoles sparked, emergency lights bathed the room in a hellish red glow, and the deck plating shuddered violently. Amid the panic, Tasman Moray moved with a cold, professional resolve. "Evacuate all personnel, sectors Gamma through Theta," she commanded, her voice cutting through the din. "Prioritize the civilian habitats. Seal all compromised corridors. Get everyone to the docking bays." Her loyalty to the corporation shattered the moment she uncovered the truth about the Valiant Spark. Her duty now was to the people under her command, the men and women who, like her, had served a corrupt master. The collapse's slow, staged nature and the fact that the attack had come during a shift change bought her time. They could save most of them. A private communication cut through the turmoil on her personal flex screen, bypassing the station's dying systems. From an untraceable source, but she knew its sender, Randall. The message contained 2 items. First, a data packet, a complete, unredacted copy of Hellion's internal files on the Valiant Spark disaster, including the original, unaltered schematics for his acoustic fracturing technology. Enough evidence to bring the corporation to its knees. Second, a set of coordinates, a private escape pod fully fueled and supplied on a remote, undamaged docking bay in a station section that was, for the moment, stable. The message ended with a simple line of text. They lied. Here's proof. Docking cluster Epsilon, escape pod 4. be smart. She looked at the collapsing fortress around her, the symbol of her life's work turning into a tomb. Then she looked at the data core in her hand. He had given her more than destruction. He had given her a weapon, created more than chaos, and offered her a way out. She finished issuing her final evacuation orders, transferring command to her deputy. Then, with a last look at the dying command center, she turned and moved toward docking cluster Epsilon, away from the main evacuation points. Tamsin Moray was a survivor. Time to supervise her own withdrawal.
Okay, no problem. Pella's voice crackled with renewed urgency. That's a large, expanding, and hostile debris field we're in the middle of, and, oh, lovely, company. 3 Hellion security cruisers, sleek predatory vessels, dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge, alerted by the Bastion's distress call. They launched fighters. The Bastion's collapse had turned their immediate area into a maelstrom of tumbling rock and twisted metal. Pella was dodging more than fire now. She was dancing with chaos. The little compass Randall had given her swung wildly on her console, a frantic needle in a sea of turbulence, and she grinned. "Boar, get in the gunner's seat," Randall ordered, pulling up the schematics for the Hellion cruisers on the main display. "I'll call out the weak points. You take the shots." Boar moved immediately. He scrambled into the gunnery pod, his movements now fueled by a focused intensity.
Give me targets, human.
"Lead cruiser," Randall said, highlighting a spot near the ship's primary sensor array. "Their shield emitters have an exposed power coupling right there. Hit it."
On it.
Boar growled. The Gambit's main cannon fired. This time, the bolt of plasma was a spear of energy. It struck the cruiser exactly where Randall had indicated. The ship's shields flickered and died.
"Again," Randall said, highlighting a weapon emplacement.
"They're portside plasma cannons. Take them out."
Boar fired. The cannons exploded in a secondary detonation that crippled the cruiser's flank. They disabled one cruiser and damaged another, punching a hole in the tightening net of Hellion reinforcements.
"That's my window!"
Pella yelled. The opening Randall and Boar had created was all she needed, and she pushed the throttle to its limits. The Gambit shot through the gap, its engines screaming as it accelerated toward open space and the safety of hyperspace. Hours later, the Gambit drifted silently in a quiet, uncharted nebula. Its crew gathered in the cargo bay. The ship's long-range tractor beam had snagged the Bastion's main vault module as it tumbled free from the wreckage. Boar had cut it open with a plasma torch. Inside was a fortune in corporate bearer bonds and rare minerals. And tucked away in a reinforced container was Randall's data core. He picked it up, feeling the familiar weight of it in his hands. His life's work, his name, his stolen future, all contained in a small rectangle of metal and circuitry. As the crew celebrated, counting their unbelievable haul, Randall told them the whole story. He told them about the Valiant Spark, about his stolen designs, about the life the Hellion Corporation had taken from him. This was about more than money, revenge, justice, and taking back what was his. When he finished, the cargo bay was quiet. He activated the data core and projected a file for them to see. Hellion's internal correspondence, admitting knowledge of his design's incorrect implementation and that they framed him to cover it up. The proof was stark and undeniable. Valeric walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Well, the job description has changed. The Gambit now has a permanent Chief Creative Destruction Officer." He paused, a rare, thin smile on his face. "Enjoy the celebration. As of today, we're the most wanted crew in the sector." Boar lumbered over, holding out one of his 4 hands. It held a flask of potent dendron liquor. It smelled like jet fuel and regret.
"You earned this, human,"
he rumbled. Randall took the flask and drank deeply. It burned all the way down. He looked around at the strange crew, the stoic, gambling captain, the gruff, honorable weapons officer, the anxious, brilliant pilot. For the first time in 5 years, he was part of something. He smiled, a genuine smile. born of exhaustion and satisfaction. He had found a home.